Welcome to the Gita in Action podcast. My name's Radha, and I'm here with our regular family of seekers. We're reading through the Bhagavad Gita. I think we're on episode like 93 today, 92 or 93. We're getting up there. We're almost at our 100th episode. We'll have to have some kind of celebration for our 100th episode. But even more exciting than that is that we're about to finish chapter 6. And after we finish chapter 6, we're going to get into the Bhakti Yoga section of the Gita. And we'll be there for a while, for 6 chapters. So that will be really sweet and nectarian. So, and we have our gang established here, our crew, our live crew established to guide us through that. So looking forward to that journey with you all. And today we are going to start at text 45. So chapter 6, text 45. We're going to try to get through 3 texts today. And with that, Stella, when you're ready, I'll share my screen. And please read for us.
Okay. And when the yogi engages himself with sincere endeavor in making further progress, being washed of all contaminations, then ultimately achieving perfection after many, many births of practice, he attains the supreme goal.
Thank you. So I liked this part. I heard this line in a class and it stuck with me. A lot of people see religion or spiritual life, spiritual practices, as just one part of life. It's like something that you do alongside everything else. You have your schedule, you have all your things, and then you just kind of try to fit it in, right? But a sincere sadhaka sees it flipped, right? They begin to understand that life itself is a part of my spiritual journey. Our bhakti practice, our spiritual practice, it's not just like a side project. It's the foundation. It's the very purpose of life. And in that way, life itself is part of the spiritual journey. Right? And what's striking in this verse is that Krishna clearly says it may take many lifetimes. It may take many lifetimes, which could be like a little bit discouraging to hear, right? That it could take many lifetimes to attain perfection. But it's humbling also, right? We tend to look for quick results. Everything we expect things to be quick, right? Like in an instant. If we have to wait longer than a half hour for dinner, we're upset. But spiritual perfection, it doesn't always come so fast. And it's a journey and it's stretched over lifetimes. And so that's sobering, you know. So realizing that this is a serious path, which one can easily get distracted, and even fall off sometimes. Right? That's incredibly sobering. Eternal liberation isn't guaranteed just because we start practicing once. It requires consistent, sincere, deep inner work. But this is also incredibly encouraging because as we've heard, as we've learned, no effort is ever lost. And even if you get sidetracked or you slow down in this life, the spiritual progress that you've made up until that point stays with you. It carries forward into the next life. And eventually when the right circumstances arise, those past impressions, that inner pull towards the divine reawaken. So there's always hope. There's always hope. And then a sincere sadhaka doesn't get discouraged by the timeline. Right? They understand the rare and supreme fortune of being on this path at all. Right? And they're willing to pay any price, make any effort, even if it takes many lifetimes, many births, right? Because the prize is so great. Prize of obtaining God, right? God consciousness. But it can be discouraging. We've probably all experienced that, right? That feeling of being discouraged when maybe your spiritual progress is taking a little bit longer than you'd like, right? Or than you thought. this happens to me all the time when I get like triggered by something that I thought it was just like over, and I'm like, man, I thought I was more spiritually advanced than that. This is natural. This is part of the process. And then it's like, what do you do in those moments when that happens to you? Do you throw the baby out with bathwater, right? Or do you step away, recenter, reground, right? Come back to your practices, right, that anchor you. Does this happen to you guys? You guys ever feel discouraged by how slow your spiritual progress seems? Yeah, it's so normal. It's so normal. What helps you guys stay motivated even when you're in the midst of that, or and when results aren't visible right away? Do you guys have any nuggets? Yeah. But you can
Well,
relate, right?
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
good.
Hey, I have a thought.
Yeah, please.
Well, it was making me think how, honestly, sometimes it's a little embarrassing, but when I hear people be like, yeah, I started, like 3 or 4 years ago, and I'm like, oh my God, they're so farther ahead than me, you know? So I guess it makes me realize like everyone is having the same thoughts, like about wanting to be more constant and forgetting sometimes. And I remember a moment where I was thinking about how some like really high devotees, and I'm sorry I can't think of an actual example of the name right now, but like people who are like been devotees for decades and decades and are clearly doing a great job, and they're like, I'm so fallen, I forget. And I remember one time just realizing like, wow, that's because I'm thinking how they are so strong in their devotion. And I think it just shows that like everyone realizes those moments where they go back in the material world and get kind of lost there and then remember Krishna, more quickly. But we're never really alone in feeling like it's going slow or we're forgetful sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. There's so many stories in the scriptures of people that were very elevated, and still fell away. So it happens. We should never think that we're even so advanced that we're beyond that. We should always know that we're just like one decision away from just like unraveling. Right? It could happen to any of us at any point. So we definitely have to like take take guard or be mindful. Yeah, thank you. Mariah says she listens to lectures. Yeah, if you're feeling that, like you're at a little like an obstacle or a blip in your spiritual progress, just turn on a lecture. Yeah, go to a kirtan, and even call a friend. Call a friend like a lifetime or like a lifeline. Phone a friend. Yeah, so this happens. This is part of it. Important thing is that we don't get discouraged. We don't get discouraged, and we recognize that in the grand scheme of our spiritual journey, which spans across multiple lifetimes, it's just like a little blip, right? And you just get right back on. You just get right back on. So with that, let's move to 46. When you're ready, Stella.
A yogi is greater than the ascetic, greater than the empiricist, and greater than the fruitive worker. Therefore, O Arjuna, in all circumstances, be a yogi.
Thank you. All right, so this verse comes as a conclusion to this powerful section of chapter 6. And it's really driving home Krishna's message. So we'll just rewind a bit here to get some context. Okay, if we remember back in verses 33 to 34, Arjuna raised a genuine concern. Anybody remember that concern that he raised? he was talking about how the mind is so restless and hard to control. This was when he was just like, I hear what you're saying, Krishna, but it's so difficult. I'm not sure I can do it. And then Krishna answers this question. Krishna gives him some encouragement. And then in verses 37 through 39, he follows up with another heartfelt question where he asks what happens to someone who starts on the spiritual path but doesn't succeed. And then Krishna responds, from verses 40 to 45. And this is where he reassures Arjuna that no sincere effort is ever lost, right? And that the spiritual journey continues across lifetimes. Okay, so now we've arrived at verse 46. This is the conclusion of the chapter. And here Krishna's making a bold and clear statement. He's saying, be a yogi. Why? Because a yogi is greater than than someone who just practices austerities, or than someone who just pursues intellectual knowledge, right? Or someone who does things just for material rewards. Right? So in other words, Krishna's making a strong endorsement of the path of yoga. But we have to understand what yoga really means here. And in this context, yoga is primarily referring to the connection with the absolute truth, with Krishna himself. When we say yoga, that's what we're talking about here. This connection is what makes yogis greater than others. So it's not about external practices or accomplishments, right? It's about whether those practices are rooted in genuine connection, right? Like, why are you doing what you're doing? It's not even so much about what you're doing. Right? So example, like fasting. There's certain days that we fast. Right? And sometimes people will fast just for health reasons, right? Or body image. And that's different. That's not yoga. That's dieting. Okay, even if you're fasting on a spiritual day, but your mind is obsessing around it and making it, mean something about yourself and connecting it to your body image and, your self-control, whatever it is, that's you're trying, but the intention isn't quite there. Right? It's like, and what we really want to focus on is that intention. We want to do things so that we can connect with God. That's what's most important, is the why behind what we're doing it. Right? If fasting is done as an offering, with an intention to purify the mind and deepen spiritual connection, then it becomes a form of yoga. So you could be doing the same thing, but it's actually quite different. And therefore the results are quite different. One is probably going to make you more insecure. And the other is going to make you get out of the ego entirely and connect with God. Right? So that's the core point. The core point is that connection matters more than the act itself. So it's yoga, it's not just about techniques, it's about purpose. The goal isn't self-denial or knowledge for its own sake or even productivity. The goal is Krishna. Okay, so here Krishna's telling Arjuna and all of us that whatever we're doing, it should be done as a yogi. Right? That means doing it with the intention to connect to divinity, to the divine. Right? And this can be a tricky one because we tend to get so wrapped up in our own ego that we don't even know that we're doing it. Right? We make it about that exact amount of rounds that we're chanting a day and then we can kind of judge ourselves if we're good or bad, if we achieved it. And it's good to have goals and it's good to, have discipline, but at the same time, we can't let that kind of material mindset take over and overshadow the why behind we're doing it, the why behind why we're doing it, which is connection. And we get so caught up in our own ego that we can't even connect. It's like if like a child's going to make a craft for their parents for Mother's Day or something, and it's like the mom doesn't really care how perfect it is. And certainly doesn't want the child to beat themselves up about how perfect it is, right? The mom cares that it's done with love. That's what's most important. If they see how much love the child puts into that, that's all that matters. But the child can get caught up. Right? The child mentality can get materialistic, can get in that comparative mindset. So we have to go beyond that and really make that intention to focus on the connection, why we're doing what we're doing, and try to purify that. Focus more on purifying the intention than even perfecting what you're doing. And if your intention is pure, perfection will come. Okay? So we go from the inside out. And it's good for us to ask ourselves, am I doing things for the sake of connection, or am I just going through the motions? And it's so easy for things to slip like that. I went to a Holy Name retreat in May, and I realized how caught up I was in just going through the motions. Having a baby last year was just like I was just trying to fit in my rounds. I was just trying to make it happen. That I kind of even like lost touch with why. My mind was so busy that I was just like, okay, let's just fit them in when I can. And sometimes we're in those kinds of survival states, right? But we always want to come back to this connection. And that's what this retreat kind of was a reminder for me in that. It's about so much more than just doing the things, right? In fact, just doing the things is just a vehicle for the connection. So don't get too caught up in the vehicle. So in the next verse, 647, this will be our final verse, Krishna will clarify even more what kind of yogi he's talking about. Right? So he's building up something very personal and beautiful. But here the message is loud and clear. Right? It's be a yogi, because there's nothing greater than living a life of connection with the absolute. So that's where we're going. 37 or 47. Does anybody want to share anything before we move on? Can you guys relate to that? Getting just caught up in just doing things and the meaning kind of slowly goes away? Yes, it's so normal again. Okay, 47. When you're ready, Stella, take us home.
And of all yogis, the one with great faith, who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me. He is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. That is my opinion.
Thank you. Okay, so at this point in the Gita, something very significant is happening. Okay, so up until now, the focus has been a lot on controlling the mind, right? Rising above material influence, understanding the soul's position through renunciation and detached action. That's what we've talked about a lot in these first 6 chapters. But what we're seeing here in these final verses of chapter 6, Krishna is shifting the tone. He's beginning to introduce a deeper truth, right? And that is that yoga should culminate in bhakti. So in the last verse, we just heard that a yogi is greater than the ascetic, the intellectual, and the worker. Okay, but in this verse, Krishna is revealing who the best yogi of them all is, and that is the yogi who thinks of me with faith and love. Right? They're the highest. The yogi who thinks of me with faith and love. Right? Not the yogi who knows the most, right? Not the yogi who is the most productive, but the yogi who thinks of me with faith and love. And then this is the turning point. Because Krishna's not just asking us to control the mind, which is important, that's a foundational, but he's inviting us to connect the heart. And that's where all of this is taking us. And that's where all this is going to take us into to the next section of the Gita. Right? The highest yoga, the connection with Krishna. So again, that's what yoga means. In essence, it means connection. And the highest form of connection is not just mental or intellectual, it's emotional. It's personal, it's loving. This is bhakti. Okay? Krishna is in everyone's heart, but how deeply we realize it, that varies. But bhakti means realizing that Krishna is not just in the heart as an observer, but he's the very object of our love, the goal of life. And when we live in remembrance of Krishna, We live in Krishna. That's the culmination of yoga. And so many of us start spiritual life in the head, right? We're learning, we're trying to get it right. Right? But the goal is, and eventually the point should shift. Something should shift. It should move into the heart. It just should move from the head to the heart. And not that the step for the head is important. We need knowledge, we need intelligence to kind of like disarm our intellect, to kind of like put us at peace so that it can move into the heart. So we have to some degree maybe kind of satisfy the head, but we should know that it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop. We shouldn't just be obsessed with learning and knowing, and it should move into the heart. That's the goal. That's where all of this is taking us. Have you guys experienced this? Maybe like a moment in spiritual life where something moved from the head to the heart for you? Like, and how that felt? I know when it moves from my head to my heart, I'm like less, it's easier for me to talk about. Right? When it's just in my head, I'm not like, it's not like fully convinced of it yet. But when it's in my heart, it's like, okay, I'm not like, I can talk about it with anybody. Or sometimes you're like kind of like, oh, what's this person gonna think? Or, but once it moves to your heart, it's like your ego is just, it's dropped. Like it doesn't matter. But so that's where we're trying to get. You know, do I see Krishna as someone I'm meant to love, not just understand or obey? And that's a stepping stone. Do I understand what Krishna wants me to do? Am I obeying him? Right? But you're still very centered in the ego, in that kind of mentality. Right? It's still about me. It's still about how good I'm doing. Right? When really it should be about connection. That's where we're going. It's about connection. And we can think too about just all the emotions that we've previously offered only to people or situations that I can now try offering to Krishna. And this is something, you feel yourself kind of getting overly involved emotionally with someone or something. And because you start getting like physically, maybe you start getting hot, you start getting angry. It's like occupies your mind so much that you can't think of anything else. You're so distracted. You think about all that emotional energy. If we could just channel that and offer it to Krishna, right? What the result would be. And how connected we'd feel, how uplifted we'd feel, how peaceful we'd feel, how joyous we'd feel. Because we all know that connection is everything, right? We feel that even materialists come to that conclusion. When I connect with my kids, when I connect with my family, when I connect with my dog, like that's the highest, right? In the material realm. But Krishna is the ultimate, right? God is the ultimate. All that's just preparing us to connect with God. And the joy that exists there, it's like infinite beyond the highest material connection you can imagine. Right? So imagine if we could shift offering things to that. And I try to do that sometimes when I notice myself like overly involved in something that is ultimately kind of pulling me down, right? Because we know when we get attached to something, it can bring out the ick in us. Right? So when you feel yourself kind of overstepping that boundary emotionally, maybe just kind of reel it in and try to offer some of that to Krishna. And then what we'll even see is that you're able to show up in that situation in a way that's more loving. You'll have more to offer to that situation. Does anybody want to share anything? Is anything like coming up? I'd love to hear what's coming up for you guys, and that's how you're relating. Maria, please share.
I'm not sure how well this fits in, but I had a really awesome thing happen this past week or so. I'm part of drumming circles where we all get together and drum together. And we had it in this one lady's garage a couple weeks ago because we were afraid it might rain. And so she kept going out because she was petrified of this bird that was, she thought he was harassing her and her husband because he was dive bombing them and he'd hide in different spots and then just jump out and surprise and attack. But he wasn't really attacking, he was just provoking them, I guess. And he was tapping on their windows and door, and they were afraid of him. And I right away got the feeling that he just wanted to play. So I went out and I found Benny and I had a talk with him. And I really got the strong impression he wanted to play. He wanted to be part of the family, maybe get fed or whatever. So I went back and I told her. And I just felt like I did my little part in the scheme. So, anyways, she started sending me pictures. Her and her husband started feeding him. They set a place at their outside table for him, invited him in as part of the family. And then they were afraid about their neighbor might hurt him because he was saying, that he didn't like this bird. So then yesterday, whenever she got home, he told her that he fed Benny out of his hand, which is what they've been doing the past week. And then all the people in the neighborhood are talking about Benny and their experiences with Benny. And I don't know, it just like lit me up like, oh my God, like there's this whole community now that this bird has brought together who at first they thought he was a pest and now they've all invited him in. So I just
Oh,
thought it was heartwarming.
that is heartwarming. That is heartwarming. Yeah, and the next step would be to see Krishna in that bird.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Right?
I have all along. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. You see the super soul in that bird.
Hmm.
Yeah. That's that's a big part of this practice too. My friend started watching my daughter. She's very Krishna conscious, but she was telling me, I'm trying to keep myself from getting too attached and to see Krishna in her. She's like, that's my meditation, how to see Krishna in her. And that's so beautiful because that's exactly what happens if we don't see Krishna in in each other and in living beings. We're either it's going to go south or we get overly attached and eventually we know that also that also goes south. So we have to try to see Krishna in all living beings, and that's ultimately going to make us feel most connected, but bring us the highest too. And it will help us progress spiritually. It'll help us in our spiritual journey. So yeah, thank you. So ultimately, without bhakti, we fall short. And Krishna is very clear here, even if we practice yoga, if our aim is not ultimately to serve and to love God, we eventually fall back to our material position. Why? Because we haven't yet aligned with our true identity, right? We are eternal servants of God. We're meant to love Him. And what happens when we love Him? We want to serve Him. It's natural. Serving is not something that, again, we have a tendency to kind of turn this into our ego too, right? We love doing that, taking something beautiful and just putting our ego right in the middle of it, right? So it's not to say, oh, I did this much and, I've put in more than anybody else and I'm sacrificing so much for you. That's not service. Right? That's kind of like a perverted codependent relationship. Service it's a symptom of love. It happens naturally. When you love someone, you want to serve them. Like again, the purest example we can relate to in this material world is a mother for their child. And even that can get pretty perverted with people. But you naturally love and you'll do anything for them because you love them. You don't expect anything in return. But that's where we have to get with God. Okay? And that's when we're situated in our true identity, that we are eternal servants of God. And sometimes that word has a stigma to it too, right? Servant. I don't want to be anybody's servant. Right? Because we have this material, we're so conditioned in this material mentality that like a servant is low, right? And a master is high. I don't want to be a servant because I don't want anyone to take advantage of me, or, sometimes it's even yuck hearing that. But not in the spiritual world, right? In the spiritual world, the servant, it's the highest, right? When you can serve your beloved, that's a privilege. Okay? It's a privilege. Our material conditioning makes it otherwise. But that is connection, right? That is connection. That's what our heart is yearning for in its purest state. Which is why it's even important, when we have material relationships, that we have kind of healthy material relationships so they don't taint us in a way that it's like we could never get this. So all other forms of yoga, karma yoga, just yoga of action, right? Jnana yoga, yoga of knowledge, dhyan yoga, meditation, right? They're all meaningful only when they eventually lead to bhakti yoga. That's where they're all going. Right? We can kind of think of it like a staircase. Okay, like a 4-story building. Okay, each level represents a different level of spiritual realization. And we've gone through them all in these first 6 chapters. We've talked about all of them, right? The first floor is like that karma kanda floor, right? So where you're like, where God is essentially like an Amazon Prime. Like, I'll do this and you give me this. And that's a step, right? That's a step. You're connecting in some way, but it's very like elementary, right? Your destination is heaven. You get higher pleasures. You get more refined pleasures. Okay, the second floor is this Brahman realization. This is reached through knowledge, through intellectual inquiry. We talked about this yan, right? And the floor that you obtain, the destination you obtain, is Brahman. Okay, we'll talk more about that as we go forward. Right, but the third floor is this Paramatma realization. This is what we talked about in the 6th chapter. Right, this is reached through Ashtanga yoga, this meditative yogic practice. It's realizing God in the heart. Okay, but the topmost floor is this Bhagavan realization. This is realized only through bhakti, that God is a personal form, right? Waiting to reciprocate love with you. That's this top floor, this top spiritual realization of God. So some staircases, they'll stop at the lower floors, right? Like you might only get to this first floor, this floor of heaven, this karma kanda floor, right? Yan to the second, dhyan to the third. But only bhakti takes you all the way to the top, to the personal, loving relationship with God. And the beauty of that is once you're there, once you're at the top floor, it naturally includes all the other floors. It includes karma yoga, acting in devotion, jnana yoga, knowing Krishna, dhyan yoga, remembering him constantly. It engages the body, the mind, the intelligence, all led by the heart. Because the heart is the real driver of our spiritual life. Everything else follows suit, isn't it? Like when your heart is really vested in something, naturally your body's involved. Naturally your mind is meditating on that. Right? Naturally your intelligence is tapped in. But because the heart is the real driver. Even the most intellectual person is ultimately moved by the heart when it comes to love and devotion. Right? When we love someone, we serve them. Not because we're told to, but because our heart compels us to. When we feel in our heart, that's the power of bhakti. Everything else will follow suit. So we don't have to worry so much about getting our mind vested, our intelligence vested, our body vested. No, if our heart's vested, everything else follows suit. That's why bhakti is the highest, because it pulls the heart, and the heart is the strongest force. Right? Stronger, higher than the intelligence, the mind, the body, because they will all follow the heart. And material emotions, they'll often mislead us. Right? If our heart gets attached to something material, it can very easily mislead us. Right? Even that little bird Maria talked about, it's beautiful, to see Krishna and the bird, but if we get overly attached to the bird, then it can pull us down. Right? Just like Jed Bart in the deer, right? We could turn into a deer. You could turn into it to a bird. And if that's our meditation in our next life. But spiritual emotions, when they're directed towards God, it is only purifying. It's only elevating. It's only liberating. Right? So it's twofold. We follow our heart, but we direct our heart to God. We don't get overly involved in directing our heart in material things, unless we're connecting them with God, right? Because that will elevate us. But that's the return on investment of spiritual emotions, right? It just gets you higher and higher, more purified, more elevated, more liberated. That for material, if you really put your whole heart into something material, it might bring you higher for a little bit, but eventually it's either going to plateau or it's going to come back down. So we want to invest our heart in these spiritual emotions. And this is bhakti. This is the practice of bhakti. And the purport to this verse, there's this beautiful definition from Upanishad, I forget which one. But it says, bhakti means devotional service to the Lord, which is free from desire for material profit, either in this life or the next. So when our devotion is free from selfish desires and centered on God, it becomes the highest yoga. And that's a tall order. Because oftentimes we think that we're free from material desires and we're being selfless, but really we want a little bit of recognition, right? We want someone to kind of notice what we're doing, or we want to feel like, we're evolved and doing a lot. We had to become like a martyr. But pure bhakti, like our North Star is where it's completely unmotivated. We're not looking for any material profit, maybe either in this life or the next. That's a pretty tall order, and it's hard to come by in material existence. This reminds me of this Friends episode. You guys ever watch Friends? Where it was like Phoebe was trying to prove, one of them was trying to prove that there's no act that's completely selfless. So she's like she's calling and donating money on one of those like phone lines, and it's like televised. And then what she's doing, it gets televised. And so then it's like, then it proves right. Then she feels good that, anyway, it's like a whole thing of trying to prove that nothing's selfless. And one was trying to prove that something it's selfless, and one was trying to prove that nothing can be selfless. And anyway, it's difficult. This is because even when we think that we're being selfless, if we dig deep enough, there's some, we're clinging to something material. Right? But the process of bhakti, when we try to endeavor, it naturally purifies us. So we still endeavor, even though we're clinging on to, some form of material profit. But as we move forward, we'll become purified. We'll become less attached. We'll become more situated in our true identity as a servant of God. And the material accolades, they'll lessen their grip on us. Right? And that's the process of bhakti. That's right, how we move forward. And that's true liberation. Right? It's true liberation. It's true connection with Source. And we're so satisfied and uplifted in that true connection with Source that these other things, credit for what we did or recognition, that is like a tiny, tiny thing. And that is like a drop compared to the ocean of ecstasy. And it's like a drop of water. But that's where we're going. And that's bhakti. Okay, so if we trace the flow of the Gita so far, I want to kind of zoom out a little bit so that we can zoom back in and see where we are. So if we zoom out, we see how Krishna has gradually built us up to this point. So in chapter 2, he shifted Arjuna's focus from the body to the soul. Okay, and then in 3 and 4, he explained action without attachment. If we remember that, we talked about that in length, where Arjuna thought that there was only action or renunciation. And then Krishna comes in and integrates the two, and he says, oh no, you can act, but with inner renunciation. And then we really went into that, dove deep into that. And then in chapter 5, Krishna reveals that all beings are connected to him. Okay, so in chapter 6, after guiding us through mind control and meditation, he's telling us clearly, think of me, serve me, this is the highest. Okay, so far the Gita has been kind of about disconnection, about detachment from material. And that's important, right? Because we have to kind of pull away from what's pulling us. If we don't pull away from it, it's going to pull us. But this is just kind of to set up where we're going, and that is chapter 7 onwards. The Gita is going to become more about connection, devotion to the spiritual. That's where we're going. And so as we move into those middle chapters, chapter 7 through 12, something big shifts. The spotlight of the Gita now turns directly to Krishna himself. Okay, so up until this point, the Gita is focused a lot on principles, on detachment, on self-control, on renunciation. But the tone is going to change now. It's going to become more personal, more relational, more about connection with divinity. Because at the start of the Gita, Arjuna was in crisis, right? He was overwhelmed. Because he was confused about who he was. He's seen everything through the lens of the body. All these competing roles, he's seen himself as a son. He's seen himself as a student, right? He's seen his family, he's seen his reputation, right? These material identities as a warrior, as a relative, as a disciple, right? And they're all colliding. And he's not sure which one should guide his actions. So he's very confused about who he is and which role he should pursue. Right? So then in chapter 2, Krishna starts lifting Arjuna's vision, right? And ours, because that's what we're doing here. We're learning through Arjuna. He lifts it from the body to the soul. Okay, he essentially says, you're not the body. You're not any of those identities that you're so confused about which one to follow, right? You're eternal. You're an eternal spiritual being. And that's the foundation of the Gita's spiritual message, right? It's meant to kind of pick us up from wherever we are, whatever we're challenged with, whatever, war we're facing. And it's supposed to kind of pick us up completely out of that and say, hey, you are none of these things. You are way too invested, way too infatuated with this material energy. What you actually are is a spiritual being, a soul. And the whole purpose of what's going on around you is to elevate that soul. Right? You don't need to get so invested. You don't need to become so obsessed. Right? This is the foundation of the Gita spiritual message. It's just supposed to pluck us up, pluck us right out of that. Right? What's churning in our minds, in our lives that we're so obsessed with. Right? And then it teaches us, okay, look, you're a soul. And to live as a soul, you have to act in the world without getting entangled in it. So that's where karma yoga comes in. He comes in and he teaches us karma yoga, this acting without selfish attachment, offering the results to something higher. That's where we start, right? So it's like, look, you're not a soul, and if you're not a soul, you need to act like you're not a soul. You're not the body. You're a soul, and if you're not the body, you need to act like you're not the body. You need to act in line with the soul, right? And that is to act without selfish attachment. Offer the results to something higher. And through that process, we become anchored in our true identity as spiritual beings, right? So that's like step 1. And then as we go from karma yoga to dhyana yoga, right, we start to build this inner strength. And that's these first 5 chapters. They build that out. They teach us how this karma yoga, acting without attachment to the results of what we do and offering it to something higher, it shows us how this can purify our heart and elevate our consciousness. Okay, and that's the first 5 chapters. Then when we get to chapter 6, the Gita introduces this dhyana yoga, the path of meditation. It's more inward focus. So it's renouncing not just outward attachment. That's where we kind of start, but even these mental distractions. And it teaches us to fix the mind steadily on the divine. And then that's where we are now. At the very end of the 6th chapter, Krishna drops this powerful statement that among all yogis, the best is the one who's always thinking of him with love and devotion. So that's the bridge to what's coming next. right? Starting in chapter 7, we enter this central section of the Gita, the bhakti chapters. And this is where Krishna is going to speak openly, beautifully about devotion. So he's not just giving techniques or theories, he's inviting us into a relationship. So we've been like in like that pre-camp, right? That like conditioning, like in football when they have like the what do they, I forget what they call it, like the pre-camp before all the, that's we've been getting ourselves ready. That's what we've been doing in these first 6 chapters. And now we're here. Now we've arrived. Now we're invited into this relationship. Right? And Krishna's going to teach us that. He's going to explain who he is, the source of everything, the sustainer of everything, the friend in everyone's hearts. And he's ultimately going to show us that this bhakti yoga, the path of loving service, is the most complete and the most accessible of all the yogas. So where the earlier chapters focused on renunciation, now the focus is on connection. Where the earlier chapters emphasized letting go, now it's about offering our heart. And eventually, this is going to take us to culminate where Krishna's going to make this direct personal appeal. He's going to say, just surrender to me. I'll take care of you. You're mine. Okay, so in that way, this is just kind of to explain where we've been and where we're going. The spotlight of the Gita, it starts at the body. Right? Arjuna is in the middle of that battlefield, just showing symptoms, these physical symptoms of fear, of just confusion, right? Because he's so situated, his consciousness is so situated in the body and his material identities as a relative, as a disciple, right? And then Krishna takes him out of that and says, look, you're a soul. You're a soul. The spotlight shifts to the soul. What does it mean to live as a soul? Right? And then the spotlight shifts to the super soul. When we get into the 6th chapter, we turn inwards to God in the heart. Right? We connect with God in the heart. And so now we're going to get to the spotlight's going to shift to Bhagavan, this personal form of God. Right? The supreme person, Krishna, right? The ultimate object of love and devotion. So this isn't just a philosophical evolution, it's a journey, it's a spiritual journey. It's Krishna taking Arjuna, and therefore all of us, right? Because we're all on that battlefield every day, probably, right? Every day we're on a battlefield. And it's taking us on this journey from outer confusion, which we all struggle with. Right? What should I do? Right? What should I pursue? What job should I take? Which people, how should I show up for my family? Right? So it takes us this outer journey from this outer confusion to this inner clarity. And it takes us from this separation of ourselves from these material attachments to connection with divinity. Right? And ultimately it takes us from duty, right? Doing things just because it's the right thing to do, right? To devotion, which is led by the heart. Right? Duty is led by the body, by the mind, right? And the heart will follow eventually. Right? But devotion is led from the heart. That's where Krishna's trying to take us. And that's bhakti. So as we come to the end of this chapter, we're not just concluding a chapter, we're completing like a journey through the first major phase of the Gita. It is this section is taking us from questions of duty and renunciation through practices of meditation and discipline, all the way to this powerful truth that we just learned here, that the highest yogi is the one who remembers Krishna with love, who lives in connection with him. So Krishna's shifting the focus again, right? Discipline to devotion, from mind to heart. And he's not just offering us a technique, he's offering us a relationship. One that doesn't depend on perfection, but on sincerity, right? And what a relief that is, because it is exhausting trying to be perfect, right? And if you're trying to be perfect, you're probably not doing it right. You're missing something. It's going to feel a little bit hard. You're going to get some resistance, right? Because you're stuck in your ego, trying to be perfect. No, but sincerity, right? Let go of that. Let go of that need to be perfect, that need to be the best. Refine your sincerity, right? Am I genuinely trying to connect with Krishna? Right? Am I trying to let go of my way and let him in? Am I trying to remember Krishna? That's pretty easy. All of us can remember Krishna when we're at work on the phone with that person that drives us nuts, right? We can remember Krishna. And he's not expecting us to become perfect overnight. In fact, he's saying it takes many lifetimes. But what matters most is that we stay on the path. We keep striving. And that we remember that no spiritual effort is ever lost. It's never lost. Whatever you're doing, it's never lost. So whether you're beginning your practice just now, right? You've been walking this path for years. Krishna sees every step, every sincere attempt, and every longing of the heart. That's what counts. Every sincere attempt, every longing of the heart. So things we can carry forward with us today. We're not just practicing for results, but we're practicing for connection. And we should pray for that. Right? Desperately, we should pray for that. Maybe when we're chanting, that's our meditation this week. We're praying for that connection. We're focusing more on that connection and less on the number of rounds that we are doing. Right? Not that the number of rounds is bad, but we shouldn't get too caught up in that it takes us away from the connection. And it's like if a child or if a parent was going to spend time with their kid and they're like, okay, 70 minutes today, but they're like staring at their watch the whole time. The child's not going to really feel like they want to be there or they're connecting with them. But even if the parent only has 30 minutes but can be fully present, then that child's probably going to feel more connected to them. So the same with our practice, right? We show up for connection. We don't show up for like a time to check the box, right? And that's a totally different mentality. We also, number 2 here, is not getting discouraged by setbacks, but seeing them as part of the long journey. So when you act out in a way that isn't in line with your higher nature, right? In a way that even disappoints you, let it go. Let it go. No, it's just a tiny little pinpoint. Not even that, right? It's like a hair's, like on the longer journey. So just let it go and move on. And most of all, remember that the goal is love, right? And that the object of that love is God. The goal is love, and the object of that love is God. So in the next chapters, the Gita will start to feel more intimate, more relational. And Krishna will begin to speak not just as a teacher, but as the beloved Lord, right? Inviting us in to this deeper devotion. So that's where we're going. It's so exciting. We get to start this next week, these bhakti yoga sections. And I hope that we can continue to all be transformed together, because we've really done a lot of work here the past year and kind of like laying the groundwork for us. And now it's time to get really sincere about what we're doing, but most importantly, why we're doing it. So that's all I have for you all today. Does anybody want to share a reflection or anything that came up for you these past 6 chapters or today? Kay, please share with us.
It was so beautiful. Like, it was so nice, everything. And there were so many nice statements. And one of them was, if you don't pull yourself away, that will pull you.
Mm-hmm.
So if we don't understand that we are the soul and we have to connect with Krishna, if we don't keep on repeating that in our mind, and if we don't connect with Krishna, then automatically it will go in the other direction, the material world. And it was so nicely put about the karma kanda, and then the karma yoga, then the gyan yoga, and then the dhyan yoga, I think. And then finally we are coming into the nectar of bhakti yoga. So I'm so excited.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here, Kay. Taking this journey with us.
I am so, I always get tears in my eyes, about how blessed and how nice I feel about learning everything. And I hope I practice that.
Same. Anybody else want to share any reflections from today? Any takeaways?
Just Haribol, just how helpful it is that it just makes it more and more real. I mean, all of this is real, and the longer we're at it together, um, it just becomes more apparent and more felt. And I sometimes it really helps me to do like visualizations. And I was thinking a few minutes back, like really picturing Krishna, like Krishna's in our heart, we know, but like actually kind of having this little visualization of like Krishna animating my arms, like trying to operate more from that place of Krishna actually, working through me and guiding my decisions and interactions. And like it was this cute visual of like Krishna making the motions because he really is there, and so just to highlight it, thank you so much for helping us really make it real. Like it is real, and feel that and know that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thanks, Katie. Yeah, it's all real. It's all real. And if you're coming to this, if you're listening to this class regularly, be careful because you're going to become detached from material energy and you're going to become attached to Krishna and your life will change. You will never be the same. All for the better. All for the better. But it's all real. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Katie. Any final, let's see what Mariah said here on the board. She says, it's so good to remember to connect with the why in my meditation. Yeah. Yeah. I missed the board today. I'm just seeing it now. Thank you all for writing here on the board and sharing.
I'd like to just share one thing, if that's okay.
Please, please.
I think the most important takeaway for me is to remember to do it with love, because I feel the pressure to be perfect, to do it right. And if I don't do it right, then I sometimes don't do it. It's like all or nothing. It can be. And same with chanting. When I was learning how to chant, I would say it like really slow and really full and heartfelt. And I loved that. And then it was like, okay, well, you need to chant more rounds. So I attempted to do that, and I listened to other people around me chanting really quickly. And I tried it, and it felt like all my energy shifted to this pressure and this need to get it done. And I'm not getting enough rounds. And am I fast enough? And I would forget about Krishna, even though I was saying his names. So it became more just a repetition. And sometimes I could get into like a meditative flow with it, but it's nice to remember that I can go slow and it doesn't have to be perfect as long as I'm feeling the love. And so I'm trying to reincorporate practices that even though they're not perfect, that if I do them with love, that's good enough.
Wow. That was perfect. That was perfect. Thank you for sharing, Kelly. And so relatable. We all try way too hard to be perfect. And ultimately, that mindset is the opposite of perfect, right? It's so caught in the ego. And it's just, in fact, it should be a warning for us that we're off track if you're obsessing over perfection, right? Come back to Krishna. Come back to Krishna. Come back to love. That's because that's where we want to be. What a nice reminder. Thank you so much, Kelly. So nice to hear from you too. Thanks for sharing today.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you all for coming and sharing and doing the work. And it's just beginning. It's all the magic is it's just beginning here. So please continue to come and to share as we move into this middle section of Bhakti Yoga together. So have a great weekend, and I'll see you all Monday.
Hare
Thank you all.
Krishna.
Hare
Hare Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.